Hello, welcome to Queering The Ballot II. My name is Madhenu Mushoki, and this episode is vying for political seats as a queer person. To my left here, I have two amazing gentlemen who will introduce themselves and let us know more about themselves. So, let's start with you.
Right, thank you, Mathendu. My name is David Kuria Bote. I currently work with an organization called Kuria Foundation for Social Enterprise. We work on economic empowerment, but historically I have run for a political office, which is perhaps why you have invited me into this conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much, David. Range?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Range Mwita. I currently work with the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, CMD Kenya, where I promote democracy building through political parties, understanding that democracy is not about morality but inclusion. And perhaps that's why I've been part of these conversations with this movement for now the third time.
Wonderful. Welcome back, Range.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to come back to you, David, because I think one of the things that is really surprising to me, it might be surprising to a lot of our young listeners who are queer people, would be that back in 2012, there was actually an openly gay candidate who was vying for office for the Kiambu Senate seat. How was it like for you? Do you find like what has changed over the years, looking back now from like 2026 to then?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm generally surprised when somebody says, how is it that back then there was a candidate such as yours? Because it does two things. First of all, it tells me about the level of political consciousness and how, as a society, we can take progress for granted. There was a time when the human rights that we take for granted that are given to us by the now so-called new Constitution 2010, people are fighting for in the street. And, those are taken for granted right now. But then again, I also recall there was a time when we would get surprised that there are candidates who existed during Mau Mau and all that. And in our time, we took that for granted. So to the young people, not to worry. Yes, there was a time when we had an openly gay candidate running for political office. I should mention it was right after the 2010 Constitution. At that time, there was a lot of hope, exuberance in the country. I think people keep saying that it was voted the most progressive or the most optimistic country in the world. So it was quite within the context or the mood of the country for a candidature such as my own to run for office. What has changed? What has changed, I must say, is the fact that even though the rights that we now take for granted came through a lot of struggle, a lot of Kenyans don't seem to recognize or appreciate the struggle that people paid. Of course, we've seen Gen Zs, 2024, but the sacrifices the Gen Zs are having to pay shouldn't be if we entrench the rights that are granted to us in the Constitution. So the taking for granted of the human rights environment, that has changed.
Oh, thank you so much for that. You've talked about inclusion when you were introducing yourself, Range, and one of the things that has me really wondering is when you work with CMD, when you're at your space and you bring up the story of LGBTQ plus inclusion, what normally is the environment of feeling around that subject?
The truth is that this country, as much as we have a very progressive constitution, as David has rightly put, we have not been very explicit in discussing this issue. We have a very progressive constitution, but we are a conservative society. That even those leaders in political parties do not think that this is an important matter to be discussed. And they are always very cagey when you talk about this aspect of inequality. We have integrated the aspects of gender equality in the Constitution and the law. We have the young people. we have the marginalized groups. But the aspect of the LGBTQI has always been taken with a pinch of salt, that we tend to pretend that we are so moral at the expense of the constitutional, constitutional rights that we enjoy. This issue is not about morality, it's a human rights issue. Because these people, this community, they're human beings first, and they're protected by the Constitution. But when you go to the political institutions and other electoral institutions, there are some elements of segregation and discrimination around this issue. And that happens also at the level of the political parties, that they are not willing and they have not even been very deliberate to discuss about these issues. The moment you introduce it, it becomes an issue. And that is something that we need to challenge as a society, because these people are with us and they must be protected as human beings.
Thank you for that. I think the one thing that really fascinates me is when it comes to the topic of LGBTQ plus issues, they overlook it or, jump over it. But then when it now comes a policy where they want to change, they're also bringing it up over. With this recent, rhetoric of family values and trying to bring the LGBTQ plus exclusion of it all from the country or the political systems, how has this changed the work that you do on the ground, David?
Yes. So policy making, I'm reminded of the words of one American president, the first Kenyan American president, Barack Obama, who talks about policy formation. It's sort of like making a sausage, right? And it's about being engaged. I think that's what the point that he was driving towards. And true, I would certainly want to talk about LGBTQ inclusion and how certain policies are working towards their exclusion. But the question would also be, how involved are the communities, the LGBTQ communities, in the policy-making processes? Now, let me drive you back. In 2009, there was a major policy drive a major policy that was developed in this country. In 2009, we had a HIV policy. We actually had a HIV policy up to 2010, but they cut it short in 2009 because they had what was called modes of new infection. It was a study which had shown that the country was having new transmission modes that were not being captured. Now, guess what the LGBTQ community did at the time? They demanded we're going to sit at the table to influence that policy formation. I recall myself and a colleague, we were there and we were thrown out. We were told we are attention seekers. But then later on, they actually came and invited us and they said, come. Because you see, not in as much as I agree with you that our country is conservative, the point is our country is also not monolithic, right? There are people who are ready and willing to be influenced by science, yeah? And science is the evidence that is brought by science is uncontrolled. You cannot, what is the word? Controversy. You cannot create controversy around statistics, right? So people do need to come on board. But specifically to the family values policy, that's an interesting one, because where do gay people come from? Where do queer people come from? Where do intersex people come from, right? At least if they dared, like they did, enumerate in the last national statistics, the census in 2009, we at least got some data on intersex people. Let them do the same with LGBTQ, and they will come from families. So a family protection bill cannot be a family protection bill unless and until it protects everyone within the family. But involvement of the people in that sausage-making process that is called policy development.
Okay. I understand the whole part of, involving everybody and the inclusion of it all. And it makes me wonder, Range, at CMD, are there allies who are really, looking out for our our hopes, our futures? Because when it comes to like LGBTQ plus, inclusion, how do we pivot and make sure that it's about good governance rather than just, something to be offered to people?
The aspect of LGBTQI is not a favor to this community. It's a human rights issue. They have the right to exist and be protected constitutionally. We cannot be saying that we are a democracy when a section of the community or our society are feeling excluded and apologetic to their country. They are voters. They have the rights to access everything, education, even healthcare, that we need to politicize this conversation and take it to the doorsteps of those policymakers and have those people, the leaders in those political parties, accept that we are parents. If tomorrow my son comes and tells me I'm like this, will I kill him? What will I do? We have to accept that this is the reality. We cannot claim to be a moral society by excluding other people, a section of the society. Let us have a conversation as a country. They need to be protected. We need allies. I know it will not be easy. It will take time, but we need to have this conversation confidently and openly. These people must go and register and become voters, and we protect ourselves. I am one of the allies. I can influence another ally. We can be 2, 3, and 4, and next year will be many. So we need to start this conversation boldly. It is a radical conversation, but I think we need to start this conversation. So far, we don't have many friends.
Yeah. I mean, we're making friends as we
Yes.
go, right?
That's
That's the
true,
most
true.
important
Yes.
part. But now looking from this other perspective of, if I was a queer person, if any other queer person who's listening to this and they're looking forward to vie for a seat, what are, these things that you would help them navigate such barriers around the systemics of what it is, or rather how you should run for a seat? What should they do from especially, your experience of going with this first back in 2012?
Thank you for that. It's interesting that you should ask for that because, I've actually shared with you the report that I wrote immediately after, in 2013, reflecting back on the lessons learned. It's a practice, I think. It's good. We don't see quite a lot of it. We're seeing a bit of some of the elders in the country begin to write their memoirs. But I think every time you go through an experience, you should aggregate the lessons that you have learned. I personally aggregated those lessons in that report, and which you possibly can share with the people who want to run. And some of the things that I learned, because we asked after the elections, we went back to the people. We knew where our support pockets were. And we were asking some of the questions. I don't know if you can allow me to because some of the questions we were asking is, why is it that you found it wise to support this candidature? And some of the reasons I think people are saying, some are interesting. That is campaign propaganda. There will always be people who say, in fact, I think one of the statements is that's just campaign propaganda meant to dirty a good candidate. Then others were like, no, that is not true. So there is an element of denial. He's a good-looking man who can get a wife. Others were like, that's a private issue. It's a matter of his choice. I don't agree with the choices, but perhaps you would also not agree with mine. Meaning that it's a conversation that you're going to have. There are a lot more lessons that are here. First of all, we are storytellers. And every campaign in this country has been about storytelling. Whether we're talking about what was it called? Uhuru na kazi, tulijinyakulia uhuru, to Jubilee was what? Digital something and laptops, to the whole dynasties versus hustlers, to the current journey to Wapi? Where is it? Singapore?
Singapore.
Yeah. All those are stories. The question would be to a young or any queer person who wants to run for office, what is the story that you're going to tell, and is it going to resonate with the people? So that is point number one. Then a second, the issues that are being addressed by the people. Now, at the time when we were running, there was a whole lot of corruption, right? And for me, how I situated my candidature was, listen, you know me, I'm a very religious person. In spite of, being queer, I'm also a very religious person. I do not believe in corruption. The one promise, in fact, I think I had a card that said, that this is the promise I give to you. This is my number. This candidate will not be associated with any corrupt deal. And all the CDF money that we get for your constituency, you to the last shilling. Why? Because I already have enough that I'm dealing with to add on to the corruption. And the other thing, and that I have to be honest with you, was given to me by a man in Limuru. And Limuru was interesting because there was also a candidate from there who had decided that his policy agenda was my candidature. And he told me, no. What he did tell me is, tell the people, you are a single man, you're not married. Therefore, all the time that you have will be all the time that will be open for the constituents to come to you for their needs. In other words, the broader point that he had was, situate your candidature as an opportunity for the people, right? So, I mean, times have changed. This is not 2012. So the question people have to ask themselves who are going to run in 2027, what is unique about my candidature that is an opportunity to the people? And lastly, really, we have trust deficit in this country. People are going to be politicians, and politicians are politicians, but let's get 2027, in my view, should be an ethical candidature. We should run on ethics, right? We should run, and not morality in the biblical sense, because you see, that is open to creeds and to interpretation by different religions. It's common human decency, right? Do unto others what Kant calls the what is it? The law of virtue. The Kantian law of virtue. The Jesus Christ, do unto others what you'd want done to you. That common sense morality should, in my view, for queer candidates, as indeed for other candidates who are new, that, in my view, should be one of the things that we are so lacking in this country, and we could benefit if we could get candidates who are moral, who are virtuous. Let me say, let me, Actually, in the report, I do say I will avoid using the word moral, because moral has religious undertones, and use the word virtue, because virtue just means a good person.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. When you speak about this, and one of the things that I normally see that are the pillars of running for office in this country is you either have to be from a certain tribe or to have money. Now, how does a queer candidate navigate these old structures while trying to still introduce new identity politics? Range.
Yeah, that is the conversation that we need to have. That as a country, the cost of elections in this country is very high. And when you're from a minority community, like a queer person, it means that even the cost will be higher than expected. So we need to have those conversations. And also, the reason why we want to introduce this conversation to political parties is when they are waiving the campaign money, nomination fee for other marginalized groups. This should be a community that should be identified, and they waive money for that particular candidate. I think it is important that we need to accept as a country, as a society, that we have these people within ourselves. There are human beings, they need to be political candidates. Why don't we even see which political parties are accepting our candidature? Are they the left-leaning parties or the leaning parties, so that those can become our allies, that the members of this community can be able to go to this particular party because they are accepted and understood, and they can be given some waivers and opportunities to vie. But it is important that we openly have this conversation with these political parties, electoral institutions, so that we can be understood as a people who are also qualified to lead, not to be stigmatized. Yeah.
Okay, so I just have a follow-up question. Are there any parties currently that are more inclusive?
On paper, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there are.
On paper, if you look at the constitutions of these political parties, they are very progressive. But the question is, there is a gap around the queer community, around inclusion. Because we talk about young people, super minorities, we'll talk about Ogieks, we'll talk about where I come from Kuria. Not so we talk about women.
Yeah.
But what about this one? Yeah. Why are we not openly speaking about it? And I want to challenge this community that going, for example, to 2027 elections, can't we have a model manifesto like this report that David Kuria has produced, a model manifesto for the queer community that we can be able to use to advocate for inclusion in the political parties' manifestos and going forward? Look at how, for example, the political parties' fund is shared. The law specifies this amount of money goes to women, young people. But there is a community here we have not identified in law. It will not be identified unless this conversation is brought on board, and they start discussing it. It may be uncomfortable for now, but it will be fulfilling going forward. Yeah.
Okay, so on paper there is a way. So it's us to fill in that gap, right? Now coming back to you, because we've already talked about how it is expensive to run for office, but also how can a queer candidate in Kenya, run a safe campaign in this environment? Are there any advices you'd give?
That's an interesting question. Safety, because safety obviously is very important for everyone, for every candidate, but particularly for those who are most at risk, right? So that's an element of risk. And so there is a risk mapping. I think it's also something that our female candidates are told, right? And I think a lot of very qualified female candidates find that they cannot go there because of a safety and security issue. But and I have some ideas, but if you allow me to piggyback on the conversation around political parties and what both political parties and also the queer community can do, first of all, I agree with you on the issue of what you called a queer manifesto. Now, okay, fine, the name is maybe screaming, but really, what are the issues going to be? The issues are going to be bread and butter issues around safety, issues around the impact of marginalization, which is economic deprivation. It's going to be exclusion in education, the trans community, especially around schooling and access to school, identity card, legal identity. So they are some of them are actually very simple policy issues, but those are the issues that are going to what would be called a queer manifesto, what is uniquely queer. But these are also issues that revolve around everyone else. If it is legal identity, it's the issue that is being faced by everyone around the borders, the Kenyan borders. If it is the impact of marginalization on access to economic empowerment, those are also being faced. So they are not unique per se. Now, this is where the queer people who are running for office and want to get into the political parties need to understand, how do you frame those issues so that they are not just uniquely, we are queer, we are here, and we are rainbow. No, I mean, learn how to broaden your issues in a way that, we started by saying we are storytellers, and your story has to resonate with the people that you want to vote for you. The political party certainly wants your vote, the queer vote, but it also wants a lot of other people's vote. So there has to be a framing of these issues in a way that everybody is included. When they talk of the family, you're saying everybody comes from a family, right? And the impact on one member of the family really negatively impacts everyone else in the family. So we need to understand how to broaden the conversation. Now to the security issue. First of all, it's safer to run under a political party than as an independent. You're less vulnerable because you have structures that support you. Secondly, the money issue that you talked about is political parties generally tend to have more financial muscle. So you have to ask yourself, how do we frame these conversations around the political parties? But the somber news, the sad news is that it's a political competition. There are no runners-up in politics. Sadly, there is only one person must win. And given the nature of our politics, the way it has become monetized, people spend so much money, so it's a do or die. So as a community, if the community is going to benefit from people advancing rights that advance their cause, the community really has to come about and protect the people. So they have to provide resources, money. They have to provide cars. They have to provide, support, evacuation mechanisms. I mean, because you really have to campaign, and you campaign even in conditions of hostility, right? Because your competitor, the moment your competitor notices that you're avoiding areas where there are stone throwing, then they now create stone throwing everywhere you go. So you have to have the community come there with you and protect you. I had a friend of mine who was running, and we ensured that around her, we completely followed her so that if the stones were thrown, we would be the first to be thrown at. Lastly, we have the numbers. Elections in this country, especially at national level, are won on a very thin margin of 200,000 votes. I think the largest was the 2002. But that was an election like no other in this country. But all other subsequent elections, including 2007, were won on very thin margins. I believe if the queer community decided today to mobilize on this issue, we can bring about value voters more than 500,000. And 500,000, where we say security is also one of the issues that we're going to be voting on, no candidate, not even the current State House occupier, will ignore that vote.
Okay, so we have to come together to form this kind of communities. So now, would it be best if we form our own political parties rather than trying to veer our way into the existing political parties? Would that be something you'd advise?
It will depend on the framing of that, because the law does not allow the formation of such parties that are not national in nature. If the community is national in nature, then it is possible to form your own political parties, and you can be registered by the registrar by demonstrating that you have the national presence in at least 24 counties as per the law now. But I think integration could be good, because where I'm coming from is that I don't see the value or the need of we not integrating the queer community as part of us as a people, yeah, because they are part of the society, the Kenyan society. If you can go and join the existing parties, it is okay, and we need to make those parties integrate and also identify and recognize you in your own uniqueness. Because intersectionality is not unique to Kenya. It has been there in the world. And we need to start embracing this conversation and ensuring that they are integrated in all the parties that are there. But again, remember, these political parties don't seek even elections to promote policies. They promote policies to win elections, right? So, if as a community you want to be integrated in a party, show them how they are going to win elections, as David is saying, because the numbers are there. And therefore, if you can demonstrate to a party that we are going to push you to win election, then that will be good, a very good starting point. Winning election, and therefore can be able to lobby for the promotion of the queer community policies.
Okay. So integration is our best hope.
Integration is good.
Strategy, yes.
It's our best strategy rather than coming up and banding together and forming our own political party. But what if a political party is still formed and we scrape away the ideas of like, oh, it's formed by queer people, but it's formed for the national policies, and we still include our rights as policy? Would that still be able to go through? Would we be allowed to still hold?
Yeah, that's why I was saying that what if this community had a model manifesto, so that these parties that are existing, from an integration perspective, that you can be able to push the ideas, the issues of inclusion in those parties, so that you don't look like you have your own party, which may end up being excluded because of the nature of your orientation, but you are integrated in those policies, in those manifestos of those parties. There's a possibility that you can be here and you belong to Kenya Moja, Kenya Kwanza, you are in a united opposition, but the issues, the ideas that really propel the interests of the community are integrated in those parties and in their manifestos.
And if you allow me, sorry if I'm talking too much. One of the things that I highlight in this report is that all politics is local, right? All politics is local, meaning that a voter who is going to, or a candidate who is running in, say, my home county, Kiambu, is going to be a different one from the one who is running from, I know Kuria doesn't have a county.
Yeah, we have
Nyamira County, for example, right? It's going to be, and so if you really want people to win, you have to understand that the queer vote is not enough, at least at local level, to carry the day, right? And politics are local, and we cannot deny the fact that, Gen Zs, and I'm sorry to be appearing to hate on Gen Zs, but Gen Zs are very good at coming out for demonstrations. But when it comes to going for voting, we have not seen evidence that they can do that. It would be great, honestly, Gen Zs, if you're listening to me, it would be great if you prove us wrong, right? I'm Gen Xer. I would be very happy if you came out and voted for, because in any event, if an election is future looking, right? Although it's one day, it's like I saw somebody who got a C and couldn't now become a lawyer because she didn't have a C+. And she cannot rewrite history. So if people are listening and they have time to go and register to vote, this is the time, because the next 5 years after the election, you're going to be run on the basis of the outcome of that election. Anyway, regardless, politics are local, and local issues are what is going to mobilize the people at the ground. So whereas a queer party would be great, in our current system, if it was where, fast, so our electoral system is fast past the post, right? The other is party representatives. So depending on the national vote that you have. So if that were the case, such as they have in South Africa, such as they have in other countries, much of Europe, then it would have been different. But in our system, let's integrate our issues. Let's advance diversity. A party that wants diverse candidates. 1.7% of GDP is lost through LGBTQI exclusion. A party that wants to grow the economy certainly wants to integrate an LGBTQ agenda, because by integrating them, you're getting an additional 1.7. Mm-hmm. That's almost the whole of Safaricom, just so you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I remember when I was reading that report by Open for Business, and I was surprised that Kenya is losing that amount of money, and it hasn't even, passed a law that is anti-LGBTQ plus, like the Ugandan one. Uganda, you lose about 3 billion. But if Kenya was to ever pass the family plan bill that particular gentleman, I don't want to say his name, is trying to push for, we would lose about 5 billion. And that would really, really bring down the economy of this country, especially when we're in such a moment where we are sparring to be great in the region.
And it's $5 billion, just so you know.
$5 billion, yes.
Kenya shillings.
Dollars. So that's already $5 billion that they're not going to, steal. But when also we're coming to this particular conversation, would you be willing to run for office again?
That's an interesting question. And it goes, and I would like to link it to the fact that it's about, elections are about the future, right? Any candidate that is elected in 2027 has higher chances of effecting laws and policy that negatively affect the younger people than they do me, right? Now, obviously, I'm in my 50s, and the moment you get to faith law, you realize life is better enjoyed mosmos. So the running for, you'd rather, people, now, and I'm trying to make a case for the young people to run because they are the ones who have the most to lose. Yeah? So what if we have a very bad policy regime? I've enjoyed years when I've had a good policy environment. Everybody keeps talking about Kibaki days. For me, it's a bit mind-blowing because I'm wondering, we were kind of here and it was not that great.
Yeah.
But, people talk about, it's certainly better than now. But the people who want a better future are the young people. So me, I'm more than happy to give my report, to support, to be there, to give my card, to transport a candidate from here and there. And once they're elected, then they can appoint me as that kind of thing, but not run. I would rather the people who have the most to lose to invest in that way.
Okay. That's wonderful. I really appreciate this conversation. And as we're coming to an end, I wanted to ask you, Range. So you've talked about having this manifesto, let's say, for example, right now is we want to start creating this manifesto. And somebody right now who's listening in would love to get, it up and running. What procedures do they actually have to put in place for them to actually, start this process?
I think this network has a lot of literature and very capable people. I have attended your sessions, even the report you had, Queering the Ballot I, and the people even in this room here. If you caucus, you can be able to come up with, and this report like David has here, you can be able to have a very concrete manifesto that you will push through the political parties as you claim your space to be able to be included in that particular space. What I'm saying is that this network here, the INEND, those organizations and the people have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and allies like myself can be able to caucus and be able to come up with not many points, but very specific points that we need to push so that we can create an inclusive society by influencing the political direction of this country. And also we need to really see how do we message, how do we message this so that it is appealing to especially the political actors. If today groups like women are still struggling with the 2/3 gender principle, you can be sure that this community will struggle for many days because of you are going to stir, the status quo. So it will not be easy, but I think it is a conversation we need to have going forward. I'm very sure that as our children grow, we are going to have perhaps this community growing. because of these orientations and the nature of socialization that we have. And therefore, we need to create an environment that we are starting this conversation without cursing them or excluding them, but looking at them as a people, as part of the society, and creating inclusive policies that can be able to help us going forward.
Thank you so much for that. I really love that. I would like to express my warmest appreciation to the both of you. This has been such an eye-opening experience. I think sitting from this side of the room, I've learned so much about the political systems and what needs to be done, and the challenges of vying for political seats, but also the fact that we can use those challenges more of like a stepping stone and push us over. And I just wanted to give you guys a round of quick fire, an opportunity where you can tell the people back home, encourage them to like vote this coming election year, so that other people who are feeling like their vote doesn't matter, that we are here and we will continue to be here, and we'll continue pushing for laws and systems that will shape the future of our next generations to come. So if you have any, last parting shots, please feel free to, let our listeners know.
I think I've already addressed the Gen Z and the young people in particular in terms of elections results are forward-looking, so they should certainly, if they have an interest, 5 years from today going forward, then they should wake up, go register. But to the queer community at large, the issue now, I know my colleague calls it a queer manifesto, but I would rather call it, what is the queer policy agenda? Bring it together and let that be for the queer voters, be value voters, be among the first constituency in this country that can organize nationally and vote on the basis of values. Over 500,000 votes is a winning constituency. And if you say you're going to vote a candidate who uses your tax properly, who delivers on the promises that they have lied to you during the campaign process, go out and register and be the first value voter voting bloc in this country. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much for that. Range?
Yeah, briefly, I said earlier that democracy is about inclusion. We cannot claim to be a democratic society when some people, a section of the society, feel that they're excluded. And I want to encourage this community to continue these conversations, continue reaching out to allies, look out at institutions that can be able to give you the space to practice. You don't have to feel apologetic for who you are, because you are a human being first before you are judged. So please, as my colleague has said, let us get out and register and vote. And perhaps the political or the electoral institutions will one day listen to us and expand the space for our democratic participation.
Thank you so much for that. Back home, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was episode 2 of Queering the Ballot II. We are glad that you guys have been with us on this journey. And for that, I am your host, Madani Mushoki. Please have a fantastic, lovely night, day, evening, whatever time you're listening to this. Kwaherini, and remember to vote and follow Nigelhack, Galg Plus, and Inend pages on social media. Bye-bye.